Yes. Hey, Rebecca. Good to see you.
We'll be on live in 1 minute. Sorry, y'all. I'm just getting this together.
Just give us a go time and I'll start blabbing.
All right. It is loading for us. And we are live.
Day. Hello, everyone. This is Webinar Wednesdays for Native Heritage Month and the Minnesota Indian Women's Sexual Assault Coalition Webinar Wednesdays. And the theme for every Wednesday this month at this time on Facebook Live is Bystanders and Where is the Love? So we had one last week that was really great, really organic conversation, no PowerPoint, no presentations, just visiting with each other, talking about things that are really hard to talk about. But before we go further, I'm going to go in alphabetical order and just do brief introductions like we did last week. And I'll go with Angelica. And you don't have to turn on your camera if you, oh, there she is. You want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, bonjour everyone. Nabi Nabekwe, Indigenous. My name is Angelica Allery. My spirit name is Woman Who Watches Over the Water. And I'm pleased to be here, kind of doing some of the background scene work as we start up with our live and then giving some input along the way that I know would be helpful for folks here watching our stream. And this video will be accessible for folks who, have other things going on during this time. This will be up on our Facebook page, but I want to just say thank you. And I'm the membership and outreach coordinator at MIWSAC, and it's good to be here. So, good.
Awesome. Thank you, Angelica. And Leanne, do you want to do a quick intro?
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. Glad to be here. My name is Leanne Guy. I'm the executive director for the Southwest Indigenous Women's Coalition located in Mesa. We provide services to the tribes in Arizona, and I am from the Diné Nation. Thank you.
And Nicole Matthews, do you want to do a quick intro?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. My English name is Nicole Matthews, and my Indigenous name is Spirit Bird Woman. I'm Anishinaabe from the wider band of Ojibwe, and I'm the executive director here at the Minnesota Indian Women's Sexual Assault Coalition, and excited for our conversation today.
Awesome. And I guess I'll go alphabetically. Rebecca Baylog. I'm with MIWSAC. I do some of the sex trafficking work for Indian country in Alaska. And I'll give a little bit of a conference update and plug at the end of our time together. I am Oglala, Mohawk, and Romani Gypsy. And I'm really happy to have these conversations because they kept popping up in conversations, all different webinars, Zooms, one-on-one conversations. So this is going to be a good conversation together today. And I'll pass it to Tami. Do you want to do a quick intro, please? Tami, are you there? Okay, no problem. We'll have Tami introduce herself in a little bit. You know how we do this work. We're always moving, shaking and baking. So yeah, today is Webinar Wednesday. Again, these conversations started, MIWSAC, we have team meetings every morning. And we share with each other things we're doing in advocacy and technical assistance, on steering committee boards, just the work and being together in community in these virtual spaces, right? This kept coming up. So we decided for Native Heritage Months, let's talk about something a little bit different, something that's kind of difficult to talk about because there's no safety planning necessarily in writing in stone. There's not, I haven't, and I apologize, I haven't seen any toolkits on this or how-to. So these are the early conversations that we wanted to just organically have to talk about bystander in our family, which is the where is the love part again. If we have someone who's doing harm in our family, but we protect them, what does that look like? How do we do that? How do we get past it to make change? But I'm going to put that on pause for a second so Miss Tami can do an intro.
I'm sorry about that. My Zoom wouldn't undo whatever it is supposed to be undoing. I am Tami Jerue. I'm a citizen of the Anvik tribe, which is an Athabascan tribe in interior Alaska on the Yukon River. I'm also the executive director of the Alaska Native Women's Resource Center. I've been doing this work for a really long time, but also am still, still work with family and other folks around the issues of sexual assault or domestic violence or a lot of other traumas that are happening, unfortunately. And so I appreciate the invitation to be here.
It's so nice to have you here, Tami and Leanne. Thank you so much for joining. And Miss Linda Thompson, welcome. I didn't know if you wanted to do a brief intro.
Hi, my name is Linda and I work with the Minnesota Indian Women's Sexual Assault Coalition. It is very good to see everybody here today. Thank you to the interpreters that are a part of our conversation.
So I don't want to blabber on. I wanted to offer, Nicole, did you want to do an opening statement about how this came to be or any other details that maybe I missed?
Yeah, I mean, I think just piggybacking on what you talked about, we have 9 a.m. check-in calls, and our check-in calls are really about, that we started during the pandemic, really just to connect with each other as human beings during this difficult time we're in with the pandemic, and it's been a lot of grief and loss. And it also leads into many other conversations, right? And so sometimes it's current events or news stories that we see pop up. And most recently, many of us have seen, there was a news story that came out of Pennsylvania about a woman who was assaulted on a train. And there was many people who were on the train that seen what was happening. Some had their phones out and were live streaming it or recording it, but nobody stepped in and nobody called the police until the train operator seen what was happening and called the authorities, who arrested the person, right? So that led into, conversations about bystanders and how this shows up in our families, how it shows up in our communities, what it looks like in our rural, tribal communities and our small villages, Tami, in Alaska, when we all know each other, the challenges of standing up and doing something, the fear of retaliation, and ultimately, though, the connection to love being, if I love you, I will hold you accountable, because that's ultimately what love is, right? It's holding each other accountable, because if I love you, I want you to grow and to be your best version of yourself. And that means not causing harm to someone else. And I think that's really what love is about, right? Like, that's how we understand love. And it's not easy. And sometimes we have to just not even have those people in our lives, right? Or we have to have boundaries. And so that just led to, we need to have some conversations. It's not about, put up a PowerPoint and here's the 5 to-dos, because we know this issue is really complex and challenging, and we all have different perspectives and different communities. Our communities all look so different. So we're doing a series of just conversations on this topic throughout November, just to share with each other and to share with people out there who are, probably thinking about these same things. So thank you, everyone, for being here.
Thank you, Nicole. Yeah, it's a rugged conversation without a roadmap yet. And we're hoping that these conversations continue going past, our love of our communities and our people, and Indigenous love and Native love, throwing back to MIWRC on that. loving our families, our communities, and each other, and, you know, loving powwow, loving our dancers and our drummers and rodeo and our homies out there doing the work and figuring out how do we hold people accountable without causing cancel culture or casual cruelty or gossip and all the things that come with it, right? So last week we talked about family and communities. We tried to define what bystander meant and come up with different Indigenous language for it. And, you know, this is going to be a work in progress, I think, for everybody of all ages, including youth in schools that are dealing with their own bystander scenarios, right? Peer pressure, bullying, all of that. And I don't mean to be long-winded, but I am really grateful for everyone who's going to listen to this and consider all that's said so we can figure out what the heck comes next, right? So I guess so last week we talked about family and communities and tried to work through that. And today it's rural and isolated communities, because that looks so different than Philadelphia, right? It's not a train with strangers and cell phones that didn't have the courage to be a bystander and take a healthy risk. In isolated or rural communities, man, that looks so different. Does anyone want to chime in on some of the ways that it's different for rural environments? Why is addressing bystanders difficult?
You know, I've been thinking a lot about this, and it's not even from this conversation. And of course, it was shocking to hear that on a train with all of those people around, to hear that no one intervened with whatever, you know, I read an article about how people came on in different parts of the rape. And so it still seemed odd that no one would still at least say something or, you know, stand up for that person. But when I got to thinking about that, I got to thinking about different stories I've both heard and seen and experienced in our small communities, in some of our tribal communities, about situations where you hear that there's a party in a house and that there is someone who's passed out or unresponsive in terms of being able to protect themselves, and a rape happens. They rape this person, and there's people standing around, whether it's friends, family, and people know, and it's kept, that secret then continues to be kept, and no one says anything. And then it starts that whole level of gossip. And usually, and unfortunately, it's about their demeaning the person that was victimized. And that shame and the feeling of responsibility and all of that goes along with the gossip, the lack of response, and people keeping it a secret, which means to me, oftentimes, that that's about keeping it and being okay. That because that person was intoxicated or had drugs in their system, that it was okay for that victimization to happen. And it was okay for us not to say anything because, well, if I say anything, well, you know, the police will come and nobody's going to talk to them anyway, or, you know, my family's going to be mad at me, or, you know, any of those things, or my friends are going to be mad at me, or, you know, I'm going to be ostracized in some way. And I really sit there and I'm really actually quite appalled, even though I've heard it over and over. I've seen it over and over. People not responding because they're afraid of talking to police, afraid of what their friends or family are going to say, afraid of just community retribution in and of itself. And usually, unfortunately, and I think that's probably more than just rural and isolated communities, is that the victim is the one that suffers here. They are the one that didn't get support. They are the ones that are told, that called all kinds of names. And if it is pushed forward in terms of, if it is reported and is pushed forward, we still are seeing that the community is not supportive. And I don't think that's in all communities, but unfortunately it's in a whole lot of them. And it's a horrible situation to be in.
Tammy, when you were talking, this phrase came into my head. Have you ever heard that phrase? I've heard kids, like teenagers, use this a lot, that snitches get stitches. You ever heard that? Right? Because it's the last thing you want to be is a snitch, right? And to tell. And so we've like gotten this culture of, don't snitch. But then, we have seen, like Rebecca talked about with cancel culture, we have seen an increase in people speaking out as a way to completely, shut someone down, which, for some people, maybe that's an appropriate avenue because of their behavior and because of a pattern of behavior. And I totally, get it. And also, how is when we're looking at our community and we're looking at people who've caused harm, how do we get to how do we really repair the harm, and how do we, challenge it and call it out in a way that is really helpful and ultimately leads to change, right? Like all of us do this work because we want to work ourselves out of a job. We don't want to do this forever. We want there to be an end to sexual violence. We want there to be an end to domestic violence and sex trafficking. And that's ultimately the goal. And so is, just, shunning them and putting them all on an island going to help? Probably is not even, it's not even logical. We're having all kinds of conversations about what is, the criminal justice system response and, how that is or is not working for a particular community. So I think there's just so much connected to this and so complicated that when something is like this, then it's hard. People don't know, they don't want to respond at all. They're like, I just don't even want that. I don't even want to deal with it because I'll just let someone else deal with it.
The awful part, really awful part about that, and it is awful. And I think it's not even about judgment, because I think that's something that, folks are saying, well, you're just judgy or whatever it might be that, they're talking about. But I think that the other piece of that has to do with, well, especially in a lot of our isolated communities where there's no law enforcement and things like that. And so you have to call out, make the report if someone, wants to do that. And when law enforcement shows up in the community, whether they were delayed or not delayed, or that was a priority or not a priority, oftentimes then community members won't talk to them. And so we've had response, and I imagine that that's pretty frustrating in that situation. And it's always so shocking to me, even though I see it over and over again. I don't know why it continues to shock me that I don't know if it's our denial, that we don't want to believe that that really is happening. And I know that in smaller communities, when I've heard about a relative or something that may have behaved really badly about in some way, in my heart of hearts, it's hard to see, well, how could they act that way? And it's almost like we're self-taught, about trying to somehow justify the behavior that's not justifiable, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally makes sense. Carmen, I see you joined us. Thank you for joining us. Do you want to do an introduction? Nice to see you.
Hey, good afternoon. Carmen O'Leary coming from Cheyenne River here in South Dakota. Good afternoon. Can you guys hear me okay? Yeah, sorry, kind of late. I couldn't find my login credentials.
Okay, I'm glad you could join.
Yeah, good to see everyone.
It's good to see you, Carmen. I just wanted to add a couple of things. I was trying to unmute and I couldn't find my button here, but in reference to, I think in rural areas, just thinking about this too and relating to what Tami is saying. But growing up on reservation, it is so different from when you come to an urban area, and not different in the sense, I think that in small areas, you know everybody, and you know families, and there's also like a level of status within families, whether they're whether they're in a leadership position, or whether their children are good in sports. There's all of these kinds of levels of different statuses that are within families, and I think oftentimes that that allows the normalcy of some things that happen. A lot of things, whether it be a party at a house and somebody is assaulted, that is kind of overlooked sometimes based on who the family is, which is just astounding to me. And in small communities, it can be very, very harmful, very hurtful for victims, because they know that they're going to feel the wrath, and that also, rape culture, what that plays into all of this, in creating that normalcy, or that, well, she deserved it, or she was asking for it. Those kinds of attitudes really have, I think, a much deeper, almost deeper sense of value, or are more valid in smaller communities, it seems. But there's also with I always say, he who shall not be named, our former president, he gave permission. He gave almost like this it was like people felt like they could now say the most awful things. They could now do the most awful things, and nothing would happen, even though those things happened before, but it was just more blatant, it seemed like, and it has come out more strongly in the way we think about, and I'm just talking about violence against women here. I know that there are all kinds of violence, but speaking about women, there is that, what we think about women, how we were taught about women, what women's roles are, how women are held in a family, in the structure, culturally, how we think about women. But in the locker room, what we think about women and talk about women, all of those things come into play, and all of those things, I think, add to a male's perspective of who they are as a male, as a man, and I had this discussion with my husband when that whole thing came out, around he who shall not be named, when he was on that bus and talking about, I think it was a celebrity, a woman celebrity, and how he was, talking about her and demeaning her and saying, oh, how he'd love to get some of that, and how there was no accountability for him. And so I asked my husband, what is that all about? How can you not hold each other accountable? How can you not say something? And he talked about, this it's like a code, kind of. It's you don't, and I think, Nicole, you hit on it, snitching. You don't want to be that person, or you don't want to be, as a male, that one that says that may make you seem weak, or maybe even seen as gay, as feminine, and you don't want to get that reputation, and so you uphold what is being said, and you don't, you just don't take that step in holding somebody accountable, especially in smaller communities, I feel like, because everybody knows each other, and everybody will hear, oh, he's a snitch, and he did this and he did that. So I feel like until we can change some of those things, until we can, when I think about what needs to be in place to change, what needs to be in place to make someone feel like they could stop something from happening, they could say something. I really feel like it just goes back to looking at our traumas, looking at healing, looking at how do we as individuals create that change that needs to happen. And it is really hard because there is so much that we're also dealing with within our families. We have poverty, we have substance abuse, we have so many things that just keep adding and adding. And it just becomes sometimes really overwhelming. And sometimes I'm like Tami and I think, how can we still be at this place after all of these years of seemingly, educating and being out there and doing what we feel like we need to do? It just feels like sometimes you're just staying in place. But I know we're making a difference and we just keep going forward. But anyway, I just had a lot to say. So I will end there. I'll stop there.
I think it was really good. It was, how do we change the bro code to include calling on your male friend for their misogyny, for their abuse, for their sexism? Like, how do we get that to be a part of the bro code, right? Like that it's not, the bro code should not be about protecting people who are causing harm or who are saying those things. It should be about, kind of like elevating everyone to be better. Let's fix that.
One of the things that I was thinking about is, I'm sorry, was someone else chiming in? I apologize. That cancel culture thing, woke is broke in my mind. It went too far without any discernment. Discernment was my word of 2020. It was a heavy word for me to take my time and think about things. And, discernment is a part of cancel culture too, because these days there's this different kind of popularity. Like we knew popularity in a face-to-face group and what that meant wherever our communities or even high school was. Bless you, Hope Shalom. Now cancel culture, or now popularity, is online with potentially millions of followers that just chime in using zero discernment. So I think if we teach discernment and keep doing outreach and educating and having these conversations, we can use that cancel culture as a seed, right? To say, take the healthy risk, be brave, and think about how you're canceling someone on Twitter or Facebook, but then that person in a community of a few 10,000 people is still allowed to keep doing harm. So I think that cancel culture can be the seed of the next step with discernment. And then another note I had that I see, because I grew up in the mountains of Pennsylvania. I'm a mountain girl, not a hillbilly. That's south of the Mason-Dixon line. I'm a mountain girl north of the Mason-Dixon line. But I grew up in a rural mountain community. And one of the things that is so absent in my own experiences and those around me was the lack, and this is a harsh word, I'm sorry to be rugged, but no shame. Shame sometimes is a healthy risk tool. When someone's doing harmful things, there's no shame attached to it. Sometimes that's useful, right? Shaming them out of the ability, and all of the people that are mindlessly following them and supporting them to the point of violent retaliation. Thanks for letting me chime in.
We've talked about shame, for a long time, and its role in our communities, right? It's, historical role in our communities and kind of keeping people in line. And I've also talked about, there's been research on men who purchase sex. And one of the things they say that would actually stop them or make them think twice or prevent them from purchasing a human being for sex would be kind of like that public shaming, right? If someone knew. And so it's very interesting to see how all of that is happening now. And I think there's some backlash to it also. Because I think as we see more cancel culture, more like public sort of shaming, we're also seeing more pushback to be like, oh, well, women are just lying about what's happening because they want to cancel X, this person, this, or they want money, or they want, notoriety or whatever. And so, sorry. And so I think we're seeing some backlash to that as well.
I think I know what you're talking about, Nicole. I heard, I forget who it was, but it was a conversation that was happening and I just happened to be there, but it was about canceling, how there's now this trend that is trending to cancel somebody for whatever it is that they're saying. And the discussion was along the lines of, now everybody's just so sensitive. Now you can't even say anything, and oh, we're gonna get called, we're gonna get canceled because we're saying this or whatever. So it's kind of lost its impact, I think, and is taking a different turn, and again is focusing on victim blaming, I think. And it's like, okay, whoa, what happened here? So it sometimes reminds me of something that, if used, how sometimes you can overuse something and then it loses its meaning, it loses its purpose. And I think sometimes what starts out to be a good thing and is very impactful can take a turn if it becomes, it's like a favorite song and you hear it once in a while and it's like, oh, I love that song, but you hear it over and over and over, then it's just like, I'm tired of that song. But I don't know if that makes sense, but I feel like it's taking a turn here, the canceling folks, and the meaning of it now is yeah, I really do feel like it could be detrimental. But yeah, I just wanted to say that.
And I think also the fact that we can access social media, news, video, everything at the palm of our hands, right? Like, so there's less ability to even monitor like what our kids are watching or what anybody is watching or accessing or the stuff that they're taking in, right? So then they're getting all of those messages, right? Like, and it's kind of pushing even more of the don't snitch or the victim blaming or the women just want, attention or whatever, because then we see, professional athletes who are posting stuff on social media about, when they're called out that are essentially blaming the victims. Well, our kids look up to all of these, sports heroes and things. And so we have to do more work to undo that, right? And to have more conversations. Carmen, what do you think? Specifically, we're talking today about, small communities and villages and how this shows up. And I know certainly South Dakota has some very rural communities.
And yeah, I went back to look at that because we were talking about sports figures and the things that were happening there. And, like, I was thinking about some of that. We don't really have a cancel culture. You have to get like convicted to have a cancel culture. So, if somebody gets accused of it, or we know that somebody is a perpetrator, they still get on council, they still get put in positions of power because, you know, they're willing to walk over people to do that. And we have a real acceptance of perpetrators. And that's very prevalent even today. I like to point it out, but you know, they are very good at grooming our communities. I don't know how else to put that. People in our communities get angry when I explain to them that they're groomed. You know, I've said it over and over again that, you know, they're going to show up at every funeral and show up wherever somebody needs help, show up at every campaign dinner. You know, they know how to pick the people that are going to give them power, give them control. So they'll be leading the Head Start parade, and they'll be, if they can't get into positions of power, they'll be adjacent to those in power. And so when we talk about cancel culture on the national level, you know, our O.J. Simpson guy, you know, that guy that was O.J. Simpson 20 years ago, he's in charge of the children's program now, you know. There isn't a cancel culture. His relatives elevate him again because they benefit from him being in power and from his charisma and whatever. A drug dealer or a serial rapist, people benefited from him, so he was able to get away with that for a long time. When he gets out of jail, he still has his tribal resources and tribal assets and walks right back into it. So yeah, we got to do something about that. And I keep on trying. And I get a little bit of a following every now and then. But I'm going to keep on talking about it and trying to do something about it. But it's kind of discouraging from some days. I'll get back there. And that's the other thing, you know, we talk about, are we really getting anywhere? And a long time ago, some of my mentors talked about that we're kind of on a pendulum. Some days we're going to get everything we want and we'll be way over here and be celebrating something, you know, VAWA 2013. We were all very fired up and happy. And we have to build on that because we might have the pendulum go the other way, but they said that the pendulum never goes all the way back, right? So we have to build on it. So anyway, I'm not in that mood today, if anybody noticed. But I have to build on that the pendulum isn't going to go all the way back the other way. And yeah, I'm not sure what happened here, but I think I'm losing power and I might have to put something in. So I'm going to go off the screen here for a little bit. Good to see you guys.
Thank you. That's a good reminder, the pendulum swing, right? It doesn't go back all the way. I always say, like, we have to celebrate the successes, no matter how small, right? It takes us somewhere. And you're right. Sometimes when we swing back and you know, even though we think we've come so far, it just shows, you know, we still have work to do. So,
and there's a really, there's a really fine line too. So there's the yucky cancel culture where people don't think about, they just join a bandwagon because they like someone they probably never had a one-on-one conversation with, and they still do the whole thing. But then I'm kind of given not a confidential, a underground, I don't know, a shout out to the bravery that it takes to not be a bystander and call people out in the community, online, face-to-face, at powwow, at whatever, or nationally. That is a baller, and excuse my language, that's a badass, because that's a new trend. On social media for all our ages, we know that there's trends. It's like our fingernails or our hairstyles or whatever it is. It's a trend. And if we could just keep lifting those brave, healthy risk takers and make that the new trend, that we're not going to stand by and take away. So back in the day, I kept hearing stories about the goons. If you were a narc or a snitch, you were a goon. Now, if you do disclose, that's the shame is carried by the survivor or those supporting that survivor instead of the person that's supposed to be the harm doer, right? So I think that pendulum will swing when we keep talking about it and make it the new trend, the new thing to do, because there's safety in numbers. Does that make sense? There's just safety in numbers. If you're not alone, people will have your back. And that's the thing we need to do, which is really hard when in the city, nobody knows anybody. It's real easy to be a coward or brave, right? But in my little hometown, everybody knew everything anyway. And as a survivor victim at that time, I knew when everyone knew, and that damn hurt, right? So anyway, I'm babbling, but I love what Carmen just said. So thank you. Does anyone want to share a little bit, just for those that are going to be listening in, what, why is it hard to disclose or have someone's back or join that support system in rural communities that are totally different than urban? Like, what does retaliation look like? What does that endangerment look like for those that don't know?
Well, I've had many retaliations over the years. Threatening your children in school, threatening you in public places and in your home, feeling totally isolated and alone. You know, I think all of those things are a part of not going with the group, so to speak. And within your own family even. And I think, like what Carmen says, it's exhausting sometimes. And it's like today I feel a little exhausted by it as well. Yet know that, you know, seeing some, you know, trying to remember that there has been some, you know, the pendulum swinging in some areas. You know, I think we have a lot of work to do in terms of sexual assault. And I know this may not be a popular opinion. It's just something that I have thought about over the years, is that it's almost like it's okay to start fighting back with domestic violence to some degree. And it's not really. I mean, I still think we're fighting it underground in a lot of ways. But we could talk about it openly in community meetings, or people are, you know, you're not seeing as many bruises out in public or whatever it is. Maybe, you know, people are hiding it more. But, you know, the meetings, if you have a community meeting, people are willing to come to that one to discuss that. Just do not bring up the subject of sexual assault, whether it's in a domestic violence related incident, whether it's because of what we've talked about previously, where people are drunk and someone's been victimized, or whether it's a child that's been victimized in the community and it's the big dark secret, whether it's past or present. I think all of those things, people are just not very ready to talk about that. And I think about one community that was really courageous in bringing it public, and just the disclosures by so many people, because there had never been a safe space to talk about this. And the disclosure is exactly what we're talking about. Nobody would have believed me. My family didn't believe me. I didn't know who to tell. I didn't know where to go. I didn't know how to deal with it. And I think the fear I always have is the direct correlation to suicide and the high rates of suicide in our communities. And that is not what we're talking about. We are not talking about that. Still, You know, we have so many suicides, and much of it is trauma related. And I think it's sexual trauma oftentimes, and confusion, and depression, and all of those things that are associated with long-time trauma, with no ability to get any resolution to that. And that's criminal. That's criminal that we haven't the resources or the ability to help support people, particularly in isolated and rural communities. They're just, behavioral health is non-existent. And again, it's not even a criticism, it's just a reality. Up here anyway, particularly in rural areas. And behavioral health that's trained in trauma that could really be impactful or effective. Or, or even local traditional healing. Again, I think we're all out of practice. And because we're out of practice, in whatever reason for that, we're letting people down in our communities. I often feel that way, even though I know it's not me personally, but it's like when I have to say to a victim, whatever they're saying to you because you told is wrong. Because they're going to believe me over them, because it's a them. It's not one or two, it's them. And so, and you're saying, you know, this isn't your fault. This is that's their behavior. You're, no matter what state you were in, you know, when you continually have to try to convince people to believe that, how much are they believing? And again, I think checking our biases at the door, our own biases even, are still become, especially in small communities, because maybe you're aligned with that family, and so you question it somehow. I don't, but many people, it's hard, like I said, to want to believe that somebody that you know, that you see every day, that may be in a position of power of some kind, and that they harm people like this. It's so difficult because I think our brains want to protect us from that in our hearts. I'm going to get on my soapbox, so I'm going to stop right now.
It's a great soapbox. I love it. Thank you. Because how many times have you heard someone say, well, now I'm going to get in trouble because you said blah, 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 right? Like then it becomes their fault, the victim's fault for saying something. And, you know, constantly having to reframe it like, no, that person is in trouble because of their behavior, not because of you telling. It's because of their behavior. It's because of what they did. It has nothing to do with you, you know, holding them or saying it, speaking your truth and saying what needed to be said. Linda, I haven't heard you jump in, and I want to make sure you have an opportunity to. I know you always have lots of wonderful things to say.
I was just on our other, we had an event, an institute with TSAS. So we were talking for about an hour and a half straight. I'm not talked out. I have feelings about this and experiences with my community and my family. And I know there's a lot of mixed up shame and guilt that's spread out and that we want to own in some way, because that is what has been taught to us, that in some way it is a reflection of me. So I've seen people deny what in their heart they know is true, whether it's the words of a child or the words of a person that has come forward and risked. And then the other flip side is to be a part of a broken system that doesn't have an adequate response, and the community that doesn't back the person up who has been harmed. And I think as long as we as advocates and community people that are knowing the difference between what is right and what is wrong in the treatment of other people. Keep our focus, and when we fall or lose our balance, regain that focus and know that what is happening is wrong, and that we are going to support anybody that comes and tells us, and we build the community's trust, and we keep our focus as long as we can, as long as these bodies will hold up. And we just keep doing what we're doing, and that is supporting and empowering and believing and hoping. And I know it's changed over the 25 plus years I've been doing advocacy. I have seen it. And now I get to be a part of where there is a lot of energy, and they're bringing people into the circle, to help us to create safer communities and create healing spaces. And there has been times most of us who've lived rural are in tribal community, and some in big cities, because you could be surrounded by people but be alone in your thinking and the way you're feeling and the way you are role modeling behavior. But I know we have more support than ever in each other. There would have never been a time to have a virtual circle to talk about it, but yet the fear people have about stepping forward to help, it's their own fear, and society supports it, and saying, mind your own business, and in our big urban areas, we've got a horrible amount of gun violence going on. So people are really scared, that they're going to be hurt if they should step up. And it sure has come to the spotlight many times on how people witness but don't help. A couple of weeks ago, I was with my granddaughter walking from the park. I had my grandkids, and she fell on a scooter. She's 8, and she started screaming, and she told me, I broke my leg. And I couldn't tell if she was being dramatic, but she really was hurt, and I knew it. And we were on a little road here by my house, and how many people drove by us. I actually had to lay on the sidewalk with her and make her breathe with me because she was so scared and in pain. And out of probably 30 minutes of being there, because I couldn't lift her to bring her home, my daughter had to come with a wagon. One person, a woman, came out of her home and walked over and said, can I help you with anything? But how many people drove by us, looking at us, staring at us, slowing down? In the city, they call it a Gawker slowdown, but they don't stop. They're just looking, to ask if they could help us. She ended up that she did have 2 breaks in the same bone. So she went to the hospital. But that bystander, mentality and not stopping, even if we have to use our phones, which everybody carries with them, and call if we don't want to stop or if for whatever reason, and to somehow let people know you're supporting them and that you believe them in some way. And some people just can't do it. For some reason, too much stuff has been beat into them, and the society that supports it, the silence, is something we're dealing with every single day. So I just love listening to ideas and working on different places. But you know what? At the end, we know we'll listen and we'll believe and we'll stand up. We've gone to court with people with shawls and in community and stood with somebody, even though we're getting yelled at. And most of us have been screamed at, yelled at. Some advocates and people that support people get their cars run into, a shopping cart run into their shopping cart. You know, on our voicemail for our crisis line there, when it rolled over, somebody was shooting a gun into the, just to try to create and spread that fear, you know, so it's a powerful emotion. And some people don't, and I understand some of it, that maybe they've had their own victimization or their own reality with their family, or maybe their partner they're with, or maybe something that's happened, and you know, that I can be critical of their fear, but I understand sometimes there's reasons why I don't like it. And I know that I want to be on the side of making sure that we're not being silent, and we're not going to stop. And every single person on here is a voice for many, many, many people. All of the things you've listened to, all of the things you've experienced and walk with your sisters and brothers in your communities. You know, you are the voice, but there's so many other people. They used to call them points of light in the olden days. But yeah, so I'm honored to be sitting in here with you.
Thank you, Linda. So we have about 3 minutes left, and I want to give an opportunity for people to give, you know, any closing comments or last thoughts, ideas, or things maybe that just, you know, came to mind, or things you want to leave people with. So open it, Leanne or Tami.
Yeah, just quickly, I just am thankful for all of you as well. And Linda, great words. I think a great way to, I would have just closed it there. No, I'm just kidding. You know, I think a part of the purpose, if I read correctly, is where is the love? Is that correct? And I feel like love is everywhere, right? Love is out there, and it really comes from within, and how you exude that, and how you share it, and how you love yourself too. And that's something that I think we all we've all, our stories, I know I've heard many of our stories, you know, talk about how we've had to learn to love ourselves before we can share that love with anybody else. And I think a part of what we're doing now is just spreading that love. It's just spreading. Everything that we do spreads love and the kindness that we share. And it may seem like it's dark sometimes, but you'll see little bits of light here and there. And I really believe that that's where the love is. It'll overtake that darkness one day. And I just appreciate being here, and thank you for the opportunity to spread the love.
Miigwech, Leanne, Tami.
And I would just briefly say thank you, Linda, for reminding us there has been much change over the years. I think that it's like what Carmen was saying earlier too. I'm not exactly sure. I'm feeling a bit discouraged today, honestly, but I think that's just the day, and hopefully, I mean, I'm not overall, but I also think there's so much change that continues to need to take place. And I appreciate the bravery of all of you to have the conversation, because you're right, Linda, it wouldn't have happened even maybe a few years ago, I don't know. But thank you for the reminder.
Thank you. Rebecca, did you have anything to add?
I'm just grateful that this conversation is happening, and folks that may be unsure of how to move forward may get some of that light and that love, so they can answer, where is the love, right? And I'm also grateful that the tide is turning, because we get to have these conversations. And I'm speaking to youth right now, that times definitely have changed from when I was in high school. And you have to excuse my language again, but the new badass is being badass and supporting and putting your arms around people in that love and taking those healthy risks and inspiring with youth leadership, your peers to do the same. And no one's alone. So we'll be love.
Speak, which, Angelica, do you have any closing comments?
Yeah, I kind of echo with what Rebecca had said and Tami. Just being grateful and like Linda had brought up, intimidation and how much of our people in the movement, our elders, and then our young folks and even our youth, how sometimes all people can do is intimidate. And if we stick together and try to say, we're not going to give you that satisfaction of just staying quiet and looking the other way, the more change, and also the shaming too. It's a big piece. If people got told and who they are and what they're doing and the impact that they're causing people, and not staying hush hush about it, the more that we can try to make change. And I don't know. So there's a lot of growth that needs to happen, but there's also so much growth that has already happened within the last 20 years. And I'm super excited for what this movement will bring for our future generations and how we can push things forward. So miigwech. Thank you everyone on this call, and thank you for your bravery and your love throughout all the years of this hard work and community involvement. So
Oops, I had myself muted. Thank you to everyone. Thank you for being on here today. And we will rejoin again next week. And I just want to say, for me, when I think about love and when I think about bystanders, to me, the ultimate expression of love is about, also accountability. And I love, everyone in my community, enough to hold them accountable and to want them to be their best versions of themselves. And when I think about community, that means all of us in community. It doesn't just mean my small urban community or my small rural community or reservation community. It means all of us in this world together, because we are all, relying on each other to do better, to be better, and to continue growing, to ultimately change the conditions that victims and survivors and all of us are in currently. So thank you all. I will not be joining you next week. I am on vacation, but I will see you again. And I thank you all for the beautiful work that you all are doing. Thank you. Bye, everyone.